Roberto Duran came into this world on June 16, 1951, in the small town of Guarar, Panama. His mother, Clara, was a local, while his father, Margarito, was an American soldier of Mexican descent stationed in Panama. But Duran's childhood had little to do with military discipline or comfort. He grew up in El Chorrillo, one of the roughest neighborhoods in Panama City, a place where life was a daily fight long before he ever stepped into a boxing ring. They called his district La Casa de Piedra, the House of Stone. It was a fitting name, not just for the tough streets, but for the way those streets shaped the people who lived there. It was a place where kids learned to be fighters, whether they wanted to or not. Duran was no different. At just 8 years old, he found his way into the Nico de la Guardia gym. He wasn't there to admire posters or dream of championship belts, he was there to survive. The gym was filled with older, more experienced fighters, men who had already tasted real battles in and out of the ring. But Duran didn't back down. He stepped in, laced up his gloves, and started throwing punches. There was something different about this kid. He didn't just fight, he attacked. He learned, and he adapted. He had the fire of a street brawler, but the instincts of a seasoned pro. The gym became his second home, the place where he transformed from a hungry boy into a young warrior. Nobody knew it yet, but the kid from La Casa de Piedra was on his way to becoming one of the greatest fighters the world had ever seen. Before the world knew his name, before he became a legend, Roberto Duran was just a kid fighting to make a name for himself. As an amateur, he stepped into the ring with fire in his heart, but little experience. His first 3 fights all ended in defeat. Most young fighters would have taken that as a sign to walk away. Not Duran. Losing didn't break him, it fueled him. He kept coming back, learning, adjusting, and sharpening his skills. Fight after fight, he got better. At just 16 years old, he decided there was no point in waiting. The amateurs had given him a taste, but he wanted more. In February 1968, Duran turned professional. No fancy contracts, no big announcements, just a teenage boy stepping into a grown man's world. Most 16-year-olds are in school, worrying about tests and teachers. Duran was trading punches for money, fighting men who were older, stronger, and more experienced. But he didn't care. He had already learned that nothing in life was given, it had to be taken. And so, fight by fight, punch by punch, Roberto Duran started taking what was his. By the time Roberto Duran stepped into the ring with Ken Buchanan in June 1972, he was no longer just a kid from Panama, he was a wrecking machine. 31 straight wins. Knockouts over future champions like Ernesto Marcel and Hiroshi Kobayashi. He had fought his way through the ranks with the kind of fury that couldn't be ignored. But still, when he challenged Buchanan for the WBA lightweight championship at Madison Square Garden, the odds makers had him as a 2-1 underdog. Duran didn't care. He never did. 15 seconds into the fight, he sent Buchanan crashing to the canvas. The message was clear. This wasn't going to be a chess match. Duran came at him like a storm, throwing punches from every angle, never letting up. Buchanan tried to fight back, but the kid from Panama was relentless. Round after round, Duran punished the champion, breaking him down, taking his title piece by piece. Then came the 13th round. Buchanan, battered and exhausted, was leaning on the ropes when Duran let loose a few more shots after the bell. In the chaos, the referee, Johnny Lobianco, pulled Duran back, and somewhere in the tangle, Buchanan took a painful low blow. Whether it was a punch or an accidental knee, didn't matter, he was done. The referee waved the fight off. Duran was the new lightweight king. After that night, there was no stopping him. He defended his title again and again, knocking out challenger after challenger. He suffered a setback in a non-title fight against Esteban de Jesus, but he made sure to get his revenge twice. In their 1974 rematch, Duran knocked de Jesus out in the 11th round, proving who the real champion was. By 1978, after another knockout victory over de Jesus in their third fight, he had unified the lightweight division and stood alone at the top. 12 title defenses, 62 wins, just 1 loss. Duran had done all he could in the lightweight division. In February 1979, he let go of his championship, ready to chase bigger challenges. Years later, long after the wars between them had ended, Duran visited de Jesus, who was dying of AIDS. The man who had once been his fiercest rival was now frail and fading. Duran held him, hugged him, kissed him on the forehead. The moment was captured in a photograph, a rare glimpse of the fighter's softer side. Inside the ring, Duran was a killer. Outside of it, he was still human. Roberto Duran had conquered the lightweight division. He had taken the title, defended it 12 times, and left no doubt about who ruled the weight class. But he wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. So in 1979, he gave up his championship and set his sights on the welterweight division. The climb wasn't easy. He had to prove himself all over again, this time against bigger, stronger opponents. But Duran didn't believe in losing. He racked up wins, taking down former WBC welterweight champion Carlos Palomino and Zeferino Gonzalez, forcing the world to take notice. His reward? A shot at the undefeated WBC welterweight champion, Sugar Ray Leonard. Leonard was the golden boy of boxing. Fast, flashy, and beloved, he had won an Olympic gold medal at the Montreal Games in 1976 and was expected to be the star of the night when he returned to the city for his biggest title defense. Duran, however, had other plans. Despite coming into the fight with a staggering 71-1 record and a reputation as the most feared fighter of the decade, Duran was being paid only a fraction of what Leonard was getting. He took it personally. To him, it was a sign of disrespect. And if there was one thing Roberto Duran never tolerated, it was disrespect. What Leonard didn't expect was that Montreal, the city where he had once been celebrated, would turn against him. The fans had fallen in love with Duran's ferocity, his raw energy, his refusal to bow to the polished superstar standing across from him. Instead of the hero's welcome Leonard had expected, the crowd roared for Duran. The fight took place on June 20th, 1980. From the opening bell, Duran did what he always did. He walked forward and turned the ring into a battlefield. Leonard, used to dictating the pace with his speed and footwork, was forced into a war he didn't want to fight. Duran cut off the ring, pounded Leonard's body, and taunted him at every turn. Leonard fought back, but he had never been in a fight like this before. Duran made it ugly, dragging him into a street brawl. The rounds passed, and the champion found himself trapped in the kind of fight that only one man in that ring was built for. After 15 brutal rounds, the decision was clear. Duran was the winner, though the ring announcer mistakenly called it a majority decision instead of a unanimous one. It didn't matter. The belt was his. The fight would go down in history as the Brawl in Montreal. Duran had done what so many thought impossible. He had taken down the undefeated Sugar Ray Leonard. But as history would soon show, this rivalry was far from over. Roberto Duran was on top of the world. After beating Sugar Ray Leonard in Montreal, he returned to Panama, a national hero. He wasn't just a champion, he was a symbol of pride, a man who had taken on the golden boy of boxing and won. But Leonard wasn't done. He triggered the rematch clause, demanding another fight just 5 months later in November. Duran, still riding the high of his victory, agreed. The payday was massive, and Duran, now indulging in his newfound fame, let himself enjoy it. Maybe too much. While Leonard trained with discipline, Duran celebrated. He ate, he drank, he partied. By the time the fight rolled around, he had to rush to cut weight, leaving him drained before he even stepped into the ring. But Duran was a fighter. He believed that no matter what shape he was in, he could walk into that ring and beat Leonard again. This time, though, Leonard was ready. He had learned his lesson from the first fight. Instead of standing toe-to-toe, he moved. He danced around Duran, flicked out quick jabs, and stayed out of reach. And then, he started taunting. Leonard smiled. He stuck out his chin. He waved his glove. He threw flashy, unnecessary punches, mocking, playing, embarrassing. Duran, the man who had built his reputation on brute force and intimidation, was being toyed with. By the 8th round, something no one could have imagined happened. Duran suddenly turned away. He waved his glove in frustration and stepped back. No mas. The referee claimed. He said, "No more." Leonard raised his arms in celebration, but the crowd was stunned. The unbeatable warrior had just quit in the middle of a fight. Duran and his team denied it. He didn't say no mas, he insisted. He was frustrated. He was angry. He didn't want to fight a man who wasn't fighting back, who was just dancing and mocking. But the damage was done. For a moment, it seemed like the story of Roberto Duran had come to a humiliating end. He left the ring that night with his head down. He went back to Panama not as a hero, but as a man who had walked away from a fight. The world thought it was over. But Duran wasn't built to stay down for long. This wasn't how his story would end. Not yet. After the humiliation of No Mas, Roberto Duran needed time to regroup. His reputation had taken a hit, but he wasn't the kind of man to stay in the shadows for long. He packed on weight and aimed for a new goal, the WBC light middleweight title. His first attempt, however, ended in disappointment. Wilfred Benitez outboxed him over 15 rounds, handing Duran another tough loss. Things only got worse when he suffered a shocking defeat to Kirkland Lang, a skilled but inconsistent fighter from London. That loss was enough to push Duran to the fringes of boxing. For a moment, it looked like the end of the road. The former champion, once feared and unstoppable, was now fighting on undercards, winning meaningless bouts just to stay active. But then came Bob Arum. The legendary promoter saw something in Duran, something that wasn't finished yet. And just like that, the comeback began. Duran found himself in the ring with Jose Cuevas, a former world champion and hard-hitting contender. Duran didn't just beat him, he destroyed him. A brutal fourth-round knockout announced to the world that Duran was still here. That one set up another shot at the title, this time against WBA light middleweight champion Davey Moore. The fight took place at Madison Square Garden on June 16, 1983, Duran's 32nd birthday. The crowd was electric, chanting his name, hoping to see a legend reborn. Moore, young and undefeated, fought bravely, but by the fourth round, Duran knew he had him. He walked through Moore's punches and unleashed a beating that the young champion couldn't escape. By the eighth round, Moore's face was swollen, his eyes shut, his body battered. The referee finally stopped the fight, and Duran had his third world title. As he stood victorious, tears ran down his face. The crowd sang, "Happy Birthday," as he was lifted into the air. The man who had once been mocked and cast aside had fought his way back to the top. But Duran wasn't done chasing history. Later that year, he stepped up again, this time against marvelous Marvin Hagler for the middleweight championship. Few gave him a chance, but Duran fought like a man possessed. For 13 rounds, he stood toe-to-toe with the great Hagler, even breaking his hand during the fight, but refusing to quit. Going into the final 2 rounds, he was ahead on 2 scorecards. But Hagler, sensing the urgency, dug deep and edged out a close decision win. Duran had lost, but he had reminded the world who he was. Then came Thomas Hitman Hearns. The fight was supposed to be another chapter in Duran's legendary career, but it turned into a nightmare. Hearns, younger, stronger, and carrying one of the most devastating right hands in boxing history, made quick work of Duran. The Panamanian warrior was knocked down twice in the first round, struggling even to find his corner. In the second, Hearns finished the job, delivering a brutal knockout that sent Duran into retirement once again. But Duran wasn't a man who knew how to stay retired. In 1989, at the age of 37, he got one more shot at greatness, this time against Aaron Barkley for the WBC middleweight title. Barkley was bigger, younger, and stronger, but Duran had something the younger fighter didn't experience: heart, and the kind of toughness that couldn't be measured. For 12 rounds, the two men waged war. Duran, with his clever counters and iron chin, refused to back down. In the 11th round, he landed a perfect right hand that sent Barkley to the canvas. The fight went the distance, but when the scorecards were read, Duran was declared the winner. He had done the impossible. The man who once ruled the lightweight division was now a middleweight champion. It was one of the greatest comebacks in boxing history, a moment that cemented Duran as one of the sport's all-time greats. For Roberto Duran, the fight was never truly over. By 1989, Roberto Duran had already lived a career most fighters could only dream of. He had won world titles in 4 weight classes, fought legends, and built a name that would never be forgotten. But there was still one fight left in his past that needed closure: Sugar Ray Leonard. Their rivalry had defined an era. Duran had won the first fight in brutal fashion. The second had ended in disgrace with the infamous No Mas. Now, a decade later, the two would meet one last time. The fight was called Uno Mas One More. Leonard's WBC super middleweight title was on the line, but Duran wasn't getting everything his way. Leonard's camp insisted on a catch weight of 162 pounds, even though Duran wanted the full 168-pound limit. In the end, it didn't matter. Both men came in under 160. From the opening bell, something was off. Duran wasn't the relentless brawler of old. He looked sluggish, hesitant. Leonard controlled the fight, piling up points. But Duran still had his moments. His headbutt in the 4th split Leonard's lip. A punch in the 11th opened a gash over Leonard's left eye, and another in the 12th cut his right eye. By the end of the fight, Leonard had won a wide unanimous decision, but it was Duran who had left him needing over 60 stitches. That night felt like the end of an era, but Duran wasn't done yet. After taking nearly 2 years off, he returned in 1991. His WBC middleweight title, won against Aaron Barkley, had been given up during his absence. Now, in his 40s, Duran wasn't chasing history anymore, he was chasing fights. First fight, Duran knocked Pacienza down twice. Though the referee controversially ruled one of them, he fought Vinny Pacienza twice for the IBC super middleweight title in 1994 and 1995. Ineos slipped. It was a close fight, splitting opinions. Some thought Duran had done enough to win. Others saw Pacienza edging it. The second fight was clearer. Pacienza dominated, winning on all 3 scorecards. Duran kept going. In 1996, he faced Hector Camacho for the IBC middleweight title. This time, it seemed obvious Duran had outworked Camacho, controlling the fight. Ringside commentators, fans, even Sugar Ray Leonard, who was calling the fight, agreed Duran had won. But when the judges' scores were read, Camacho was given the victory. Leonard called it an early Christmas gift, and the decision frustrated him so much that he came out of retirement the next year just to fight Camacho himself. Duran's career was winding down, but his pride wouldn't let him stop. In 1997, he traveled to Argentina to fight Jorge Castro and lost. But in the rematch, held in Panama, Duran turned back the clock, boxing beautifully to win a unanimous decision. He had never lost a fight on Panamanian soil, and he wasn't about to start now. By 1998, Duran was 47 years old. Most fighters were long retired, but he was still taking on challengers decades younger. That year, he faced 28-year-old WBA middleweight champion William Joppy. Duran was brave, but Joppy was too fast, too strong. In just 3 rounds, Joppy battered him to a one-sided stoppage. For the 3rd time in his career, Duran announced his retirement. But like every time before, it didn't last. In June 2000, on his 49th birthday, Duran stepped into the ring one more time and avenged an old loss to Pat Lawler, winning the NBA Super Middleweight Championship. At nearly 50 years old, he was still fighting, still winning, still proving that his heart was bigger than any number on a birth certificate. The following year, he lost the title in a rematch to Hector Camacho. It was the last fight of his career. Duran finally walked away. His gloves hung up for good. From the slums of Panama to the biggest arenas in the world, from lightweight to middleweight, from triumph to disgrace, and back again, Roberto Duran had seen it all. He had fought for over 3 decades, faced the best of the best, and never backed down from a challenge. His career was over, but his legend? That would last forever. By 2001, Roberto Duran had already lived a life fuller than most. He had fought in 5 decades, won titles in 4 weight classes, and earned his place as one of the greatest boxers of all time. But life outside the ring still had its challenges. That October, while in Argentina promoting a salsa music album, Duran was in a serious car crash. The injuries were bad enough to require life-saving surgery. After years of comebacks, this time, he knew it was over. At 50 years old, he officially retired from boxing. Even in retirement, Duran's fiery spirit didn't fade. When asked about getting in shape for his farewell celebrations, he joked about the struggles of his old friend, soccer legend Diego Maradona. "I don't want to end up like Maradona, all fat," he said. "I want people to see me looking strong." But retirement wasn't always smooth. In 1993, his 5 championship belts were stolen from his home in Panama, reportedly by his own brother-in-law. The belts were sold to a memorabilia dealer who later tried to offload them to undercover FBI agents. A decade later, in 2003, a judge in Florida ordered the belts to be returned to their rightful owner, Duran. Even outside the ring, Duran's name carried weight. His 70 career knockouts put him in an elite class of boxers with over 50 KOs. He was ranked 28th on the ring's list of the greatest punchers of all time. And in 2006, he was inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame, followed by the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2007. As time passed, his battles became ones of health rather than boxing. In June 2020, he was hospitalized with COVID-19, coincidentally on the anniversary of his first world title win against Ken Buchanan. After weeks of treatment, he pulled through just another fight he refused to lose. Today, Duran remains a symbol of Panama's fighting spirit. He serves as the brand ambassador for Panama Blue, the country's premium bottled water. And in true Duran fashion, he even holds a pilot's license for ultralight aircraft. His family's love for boxing didn't end with him. His daughter, Irishelle Duran, briefly stepped into the ring as a professional fighter. Though her career was short, it was another reminder that the warrior spirit ran in the blood. But even legends aren't invincible. In March 2024, Duran underwent surgery to have a pacemaker placed in his chest after being diagnosed with a heart condition. It was another challenge, another fight, but Duran had already shown the world no matter how many times he gets knocked down, he always finds a way to get back up. And that's why the name Roberto Duran will never fade. His story isn't just about boxing. It's about resilience, defiance, and the unbreakable will of a man who refused to quit no matter what life threw his way.